Thanks so much for joining our session. This is going to be a session about expanding access to intercultural education. It's part of the AFS International Education Week webinar series. So if you've come here to learn about accessibility, diversity, inclusion, equity, and belonging in international ed, you are indeed in the right place. And we'll get started in just a moment here. Okay, I think folks are pretty much settled now, so we will begin. So just a few quick notes. Closed captioning is available, which you can activate by clicking on the live transcript button. And as people are joining in, feel free to welcome in the chat where you're coming from, and if you want to make any comments or greetings, we'd love to hear from you. There will be time for questions at the end, so we'd appreciate if you use the Q&A function to enter questions that come up during the session, and we'll leave time to answer those at the end. And this webinar will be recorded, so you can access it at the end and share this with colleagues through the AFS YouTube channel. If you are posting on social media, we'd love if you tag us and use the hashtags AFS Effect and IEW 2022. So I'm your host today. My name is Sean Reilly, and I am the Director of Program Development at AFS Intercultural Programs. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm based in New York City. So what I do at AFS is lead a portfolio of mobility, hybrid, and digital exchange programs. And I also oversee major grants that fund scholarships for programs in global competence and social impact. I served on AFS's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for 2 years, and I particularly focused on improving student support services when I was part of that group. Prior to coming to AFS, I worked in international study abroad recruitment for 5 years at Hebrew University in Jerusalem, and I focused on North American recruitment and university partnerships there. I also worked in graduate admissions at what was at the time the BU School of Education. It's now called the Wheelock College of Human Development and Education. And I also lived in Italy, where I earned my TEFL certificate and taught English as a second language to K through 12 students. Although my background is in international education, I actually never studied abroad myself. I had this sort of misconception that study abroad just wasn't for me. It wasn't for people like me. I thought it was too expensive and out of reach. And because of that, I really now consider myself to be an advocate for international ed, and it's a passion of mine to reach underrepresented audiences in the study abroad space. So just a little bit about International Education Week. So this is a joint initiative of the US Department of State and the Department of Education. And the main objective here is to celebrate international education and exchange worldwide. AFS colleagues of mine have been running sessions all week. So thanks if those of you on this session attended others. Like I said, the ones that were recorded will be available on our YouTube. And there's one more session coming up tomorrow for folks interested in reflection and recovery for international ed professionals. So be sure to check that one out too before this week is over. So just a little bit about AFS. We were founded over 100 years ago in 1914, and we are a nonprofit international exchange network that operates with 55 national organizations worldwide. So right now, our activities are carried out in over 113 countries. And at any given time, we have about 12,000 students on exchange each year. One of the biggest strengths of AFS is that we are a volunteer-led organization. So we have about 50,000 volunteers, which actually makes us one of the largest volunteer orgs in the world. So really proud to be a part of that. And I'm also really proud that we get to work with other NGOs and higher ed partners. They are important and very crucial players to the work that we do as well. And you'll learn a bit more about that on this in this presentation. So within our mission, we aim to create a more just and peaceful world. And there are 3 ways that we carry that out. So we aim to develop active global citizens. We aim to globalize schools and institutions. And we also aim to expand access to intercultural education through our programming, scholarships, and outreach. So before I introduce our speakers who we have with us, I would love to hear just from folks on the call where you're coming from and a little bit more about you. So if you go to menti.com and enter the code here that you see, 11504891, or you can take out your phone and scan the QR code here. That'll take you to the slides where we'll learn a bit more about you. So the first slide, where are you connecting from? And thanks. So Saskia, our program manager, has popped into the chat the link to the Menti as well, if you are not able to access it through the code that you see. Great, I'm seeing a lot of North America so far. I know, all right, there's one European. Where else are folks coming from? I have to acknowledge too, I know this time of day is not the most convenient for folks in Asia and other parts of the world where it's very, very late at night or early in the morning. So I do appreciate those of you on this call taking the time to join. All right, so looks like we've got some folks around the Northeast US, some in Canada, a few in Europe, perhaps a Brazilian down here. So good. All right, I'm gonna move to the next slide now. So if you had to describe your field of work in education, or maybe you're in a different industry, which of those indicators would you choose for yourself? Okay, I see a lot of higher ed admin folks. We've got some informal ed practitioners like myself, a handful of higher ed faculty, some researchers, advisors. Very curious about the others. That's great. All right, 2 more slides left here. So now I'm just curious, what are folks' levels of understanding around the topic DEIB? So diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. Are you very familiar with this topic, or is it something that you are not so familiar with on that scale? Okay, it looks like we're just above the middle mark, so somewhere around 3.7, 3.8. Okay, good to know. Hopefully after this session, you'll learn some new tips and maybe you'll feel a bit more familiar with the subject too. And our last question here is, what do you expect to get out of this webinar? So I think someone who put in Minnesota, maybe that's where they're dialing in from. That was my bad for starting on this slide. But what are some things that you, when you saw this webinar topic, what were you hoping to get out of it? New ideas and thoughts, suggestions for outreach, new insights. Ooh, teaching ideas, very interesting. Expand my understanding of how to improve programming. How to appeal to students who slip through the cracks, great. Consolidation, refresher on the AFS approach. Understand what belonging means since it's a new addition to the acronym. Interesting. Great. Yep. So best practices, new ideas. I think that we will cover all of these. And better idea of EDI in a globalized context, as well as expanded understanding for higher ed study abroad program design. Great. Okay. Thanks. Thanks all for putting your input in the Menti. We will actually cover a lot of those topics with our speakers today. So I'm really excited to have these speakers join us. So we have Dina Almasaeid joining us from Spark Palestine. She is a country manager at Spark. Dina has more than 10 years of experience in program management, both in Palestine and internationally. And at Spark, she currently oversees the country's portfolio of programs in Palestine. She represents Spark's work with key partners, and she supports the delivery of tailored interventions in education, entrepreneurship, and enterprise development. She's a certified national trainer in skills development for youth, and she serves on the board of a local small enterprise center organization. So you'll hear more from Dina a little bit later on. I'm also really happy to have Anggie Hall join us. So Anggie is a lead facilitator at AFS. She's based in London. She's a very experienced facilitator and intercultural educator, and she also serves as a facilitator trainer. So you'll hear more from Anggie. She started at AFS Indonesia, and now she's serving as an independent consultant for AFS national organizations worldwide. So very happy to have her here and share her perspective. And then last but not least, of course, we have Montana Tamny. She is a program manager at the Center for Social Impact Strategy, which is housed within the University of Pennsylvania. So she is based in Philadelphia, and her current portfolio includes course development, overseeing the center's residential programs, and managing external partnerships. So prior to her work at Penn, Montana spent more than 10 years developing an expertise in positive youth development, specializing in urban education. And she's passionate about mentorship, community, and the intersection of travel and education. She also served in the Peace Corps and has participated in numerous service trips and study abroad experiences herself. And you'll get to hear more about her experience as well. But first, so why are we here? So this topic, we all had an interest in this topic of expanding access to international education. And I'm going to operate on an assumption here that we come to the table recognizing that this is really complex work and it's never done, right? Diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging has to constantly evolve as societies evolve. It's not a one and done thing. And we also, we want to address current practices. So sometimes these are referred to as best practices, but the truth is we're not here to tell you what's right or what's wrong in this space. Instead, we just want to offer some insights and cultural considerations that come up in this work for us, and particularly through the lens of virtual and hybrid exchange, outreach, program structure, and different resources. So how are we going to structure this conversation? So there's actually a common thread that links all of us together in our different seats. So there's a program called the Global STEM Accelerators, which I'll talk briefly about as a case study. And then we'll dive into 3 different approaches towards advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in international education. So Dina will talk about community outreach. Anggie will talk about implementation and student support. And then Montana will close us out with insights on assessment and impact. And then we'll have time for questions and discussion at the end. So like I mentioned, there's this common thread. So if we think of the Global STEM Accelerators as a case study, so this is an all virtual full scholarship STEM and social impact program that we run at AFS. It is a new program, so we actually just piloted it this past year for 180 girls around the world between the ages of 15 and 17. It's a 12-week course, fully online, and its main objective is to empower girls to become change makers in their communities. So they explore global citizenship, social impact, design thinking, social innovation, and all of this happens through a STEM and sustainability lens. They walk away with better understanding of intercultural issues and change making. They get to research and develop ideas for meaningful social impact, and they boost self-awareness and empathy for diverse cultural backgrounds. This is a quick plug, but if you are interested in learning more about the program, the link to the webpage is there at the bottom. And applications for next year's program will actually open on February 1st. So do keep that in mind if you're interested. One of the most important components of that program is that students actually engage with one another on live Zoom sessions weekly, and these are facilitated by AFS trained facilitators. So you'll get to hear a bit more from Anggie about what that means and why it's so important. I think, in the space of talking about virtual education, we hear a lot about the student and what they do in the program, but I think we so rarely hear about who are the real human beings that actually make that learning happen and facilitate that learning and dialogue. So I think it's really important to hear that perspective. In this program, students earn certification. So we have a really awesome partnership with the University of Pennsylvania, and that is what brings Montana here today. So students going through this curriculum get to transform ideas into a real usable prototype that they test in the real world. So even though the program is happening online, they still get to engage in their communities with the ideas that they're working to expand on. They get feedback by a committee of validators at the Center for Social Impact Strategy at Penn, and these are skills that they get to walk away with on their resume, enhancing digital communication skills and their intercultural understanding. And they also get this neat certification that they can include in their portfolio. Students going through the accelerators also join our alumni network. So this is where they actually can engage with other peers who've gone through global STEM programs and interact with one another. And what's really cool is, so the older students who've gone through the program now get to serve as mentors for the younger students. So it just opens a different layer of communication than we'd be able to provide. Students also get to, they get invited to future skills development sessions and panels and other opportunities for future development. The corporations that we partner with can post jobs and internships on there. And anytime there's a scholarship open for 18+ audiences, we let them know about it as well. Right now it has about 1,000 alumni, but we actually will expand this network to have 6,000 alumni for about 4 years from now. So really excited to see that grow. So over the past year, in the Global STEM Accelerators, we awarded scholarships to 180 women from 61 countries. And perhaps one of the most interesting discoveries was that 20% of the scholarship recipients identify as refugees or coming from displaced communities. And this is something that Dina will focus on when we turn over to her. But I'd just like to highlight that, you know, this is a community that is severely underserved in the international education space. So it's, you know, it's one that we really wanted to focus on impacting this year. And we'll be happy to talk about findings from that work. 82% of students in this past year's cohort identified as people of color, 51% identified as coming from low-income households, and 10% are among the first to graduate from high school. So, you know, very different than the sort of typical study abroad profile of student that you might think of. Just looking at some initial satisfaction and assessment results, students really loved the program and gave it a 4.8 out of 5 satisfaction rating. And I just pulled some feedback data here. So some of the girls said that this was the first time they felt like they could actually express an idea. It was the first time they felt validated. And for some, it was the first and only opportunity that they had to enter STEM education. For others, it was the first time that they met other girls from outside of their own community. And for a lot of them, they expressed that it was the first time they felt really empowered to make a difference. On the assessment side, we actually saw an average 1/4 point to 1/2 point increase in global competence skills across every category. So when we say that the program actually creates impact, we have data to back up that actually means something real and it's not just something we say loosely. And we're really proud. So this past year, we won the Eddy Award from Diversity Abroad in the Excellence in Diversity and Inclusion in International Education. And Diversity Abroad lauded us for thoughtful, inclusive community outreach, marketing, and recruitment. So that's also something that I think all 3 of our speakers will touch on in some way. And we're happy to share more about that for those folks who are interested. Okay, so now let's turn over to our speakers. So I want to give each of our speakers space to share different perspectives and different practices on cultural considerations in advancing diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So first, we will start with Dina, as I mentioned, and her main focus will be on community outreach. So Dina, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Sean. First of all, good afternoon, everybody, or good evening for these with it's evening time on their side. And thanks for giving me the chance to speak in such an important webinar. So my name is Dina and I'm working as a country manager at Spark in Palestine from 4.5 years right now. My experience was focused actually in the Middle East and in Sweden, where I worked all my time with youth, especially refugees. That was actually, for example, in Sweden, that was coming to Sweden. So we actually have youth from males and females, actually women also, and adapting in their new experience and their life, especially when it comes to education and they want to continue their education here in the Middle East and in Palestine. As you know, Spark is a Dutch NGO that works from almost 30 years in 17 countries, focusing on higher education and entrepreneurship. So we mainly work with youth in fragile states. What we do actually, we provide young people with the tools they need to succeed in regions affected by conflict, climate crisis, and displacements, for example. So how we actually work also, like the way that we work, not in Palestine, we work in three main regions, which is North Africa, Middle East, and Sub-Sahara, together with our local partners that we actually count on them on implementing activities in a quality manner. So we implement our services through the local partners that empower students and entrepreneurs to study, work, and grow in their own businesses. Actually, our programs also focus on giving access to youth who really in need and cannot access by themselves. For example, we provide scholarships for students at the same time in their journey for example, when they are, for example, having a bachelor degree, or they are also placed in a TVET program. So we also build their capacities through the years in many different topics. For example, civic leadership, entrepreneurship, etc. We give also psychosocial support, employability skills, until they come actually and finalize their journey in education. We start giving them the chance to be placed in one of the kind of, let's say, not jobs only. So we actually place them in internships, just like to make them ready to start their work life after they study is finalized. So it's a full actually journey from study to building their capacities and their skills, their personalities, which actually, like from a first-hand experience with youth, that means a lot, and that really changed for their personality. Let me also talk more about how we actually choose our people. Like, unlike many development organizations, Spark focuses on fragile and conflict-affected regions and youth aged between 18 and 35 years, who often do not receive much support. So, for example, we start early, almost at the same time any aid organization might start supporting with food, wash, shelters, etc. Spark aims to also start to rebuild efforts at the same time, because even if there is some ongoing conflict over our 30 years of working in this field, we actually know that unless you start quickly, you will see a lost generation of youth who lack skills, education, opportunities to work, etc. So if they can start rebuilding their lives as quickly as possible, they will have a much better chance to rebuild their countries, economies, infrastructure, communities. So we invest in people because actually we don't know if they are going to stay at the countries that they actually refugees in, or there will come a time that they will come back to their countries and rebuild their countries. And that is very important, that we actually invest and build their skills, give them the right experience and the right education to go back to their homelands, because nothing is like the homeland. They want to come back one day and rebuild it again. So working with this combination of youth helps us actually to also contribute to social cohesion among refugees and host communities through the scholarship programs, for example, here in the Middle East with Syrians and local community studying together. So the focus is not only on refugees. We actually engage them with host community youth, because host community youth is also affected in a way or another. So yeah, that's like what we're actually focusing on and working on in, at Spark.
That's great, Dina. And so you mentioned the spirit of community impact, and I'm wondering can we tie that to something else that you mentioned earlier, which was you talked about support for fragile communities. So I think folks on this call might be interested in, what do you mean when you say that, and how might that tie more broadly into a diversity and inclusion context?
Yeah, sure, Sean. I can actually just like express it in a way that working with communities here, we actually do not work by ourselves, like Spark only. The most important, and we really believe in the concept of localization, which means that we believe in the, let's say, efforts and all the knowledge that the local partners actually know. They know the context more than anyone, any NGO from outside the country, any Western NGO that is coming to the country. So we partner with local NGOs, civil societies, higher education institutions, microfinance institutions, for example, who have the contextual knowledge and networks. So we co-design programs that are market relevant with them, identifying what exactly needed in each country. And of course, like, it's really important to mention that only really we can have impact if we work with local stakeholders to build the capacity of smaller organizations, so that eventually there should be no need for Spark in a way or another. Nobody knows how much, like how many years our international NGOs also will stay and have this role. It's good to have expertise with local people who can actually achieve the sustainability in a way or another when working with youth. Most also, like, it's really good to mention that we actually try to give the most that we can for people who is coming through the local partners. Like all our, actually, when we choose people, it comes through the local partners, because they know who really in need on that. Of course, there's so many criteria that we go in it, and we engage them and give them the experience to also have the feeling that they actually an owner for that, and just like to believe in themselves, and they can believe afterwards that they can come back one day to their countries and rebuild it again. So this is one of the most actually concepts that we're working on. One thing that I actually also want to mention, that to date we've awarded 14,169 higher education and TVET scholarship for refugees and host communities youth throughout Middle East. We're also we're only talking about Middle East right now. So, and for example, after they actually continue their studies, we place them, as I said, in internships, remote working, as these ways actually give them the opportunity to work, since many of them, and this is also from like a first-hand experience, many of them has restriction of labor market, for example. So especially for refugees who in some countries are not allowed and able to find work. So they now work remotely from their homes or even campus. And Spark, I'm very proud to say that Spark was recently awarded with the Employability International Impact Award by Pioneer Awards for our remote internship employment program in Iraq and Lebanon, which actually came from many efforts that came from the scholarship until they go to the market and start working. And some of them actually have been, went back to their countries, and now they are helping their communities in a way or another.
That's amazing, Dina. Congratulations on that front.
Thank you. Thank you.
And I think so. You touched on the importance of grassroots action, and something that we at AFS really valued in building a partnership with Spark was that you have the power to mobilize key partners in countries where we don't have a physical presence. And, you know, it's the kind of partnership that we have. It's not like it's a, you know, special sort of out of reach thing. Like, I think a lot of educational institutions and, you know, higher ed institutions, universities around the world should also consider looking into, if there are populations they're not reaching, why might that be? And what kinds of organizations, whether Spark or otherwise, exist to help connect them with communities that they're not reaching? Because you're really able to reach the human beings there on the ground, right?
Exactly.
So I appreciate you touching on the grassroots component. And then I just have one more question. So you mentioned this concept of localization, and I'm wondering, how do you choose, or, you know, how do you mobilize support from these key partners? How do you determine who they are? Because I think that advice would also be valuable to folks on this call.
Of course. Yeah, this is very important to actually choose the strong partners. That is, like, let's say the thing that makes things moving in a better way in the future. So we're all the time, we based on an assessment, a partner's assessment in the countries, like each country we work on. And based on these assessments, we actually divide work, because there are some partners that is stronger than others in a way or another, in a point or another. So we actually all the time based on assessment, we do our studies, and we, you know, conduct so many interviews. We sometimes just like announcing TORs, etc., for partners to apply. But from our, let's say, previous work, because we're having actually previous, like we worked for previous years in the Middle East region, for example, since I have like worked here for the most of my work. So we're having, like, you know, a roster of who actually is strong in this topic and who is on the other topic. So yeah, that's the way how we base actually our work on it.
Well, really great, Dina. And again, just amazing and very impressive work that you're doing. I appreciate you sharing your perspectives.
Thank you.
You know, not just on reaching the actual people who benefit from your work, but also, you know, the importance of building up the partnerships in different countries where you're operating. Because one can't really, I don't think one can exist well without support from the other. It's you know, it's kind of a cycle, right? So I appreciate you. Thanks for sharing those tips.
Thank you.
So now I'd love to turn us over to Anggie, who is, like I mentioned, a lead facilitator at AFS and also a facilitator trainer. Anggie, I'm now going to spotlight you and take it away on the topic of implementation and support.
Thank you, Sean. Hi, everyone. Good morning, evening, afternoon, wherever you are. So Sean already briefly introduced myself. My name is Anggie. I'm calling from London, UK, but I'm Indonesian. I am the lead facilitators for the Global STEM Accelerators program. My background is cross-cultural psychology. So I've been working in a cross-cultural and global competence training for 15 years now. I have been a qualified trainer for AFS International since 2012. And then when we moved to virtual learning, then I became certified as their facilitator in 2018. So it's been a long process, and it's been an honor for me to lead such a great team for this program. You've seen the amazing team we have for this program. So it was a privilege for me to lead such strong team. I have a leader for the team, actually is my friend Claudia from Sydney. It's too late for her for this call, so I also represent her. So when Saskia, the program manager for this program, asked me to lead such a great team and a great program, I say yes straight away. I think being an intercultural trainer all this time and know how international learning is very much a very privileged small group of people. As Sean mentioned, that's always what we think when we talk about international learning and global education. So I thought, yes, I'd like to take on this experience. Living in London when we're very diverse, but not always inclusive. So I always say everybody in London is invited to a dinner party, but not everybody have a saying in a dinner party. So that's not really inviting people, right? So yes, I led 12 members of the facilitators, and facilitators play a big role because we're there for 12 weeks in our online programs. We meet every week with the participants, all these wonderful girls from all over the world, and then we get to know them personally. We get to know them, their background, their strength, their weakness, their living condition. We gain their trust, as was mentioned before. In the survey, we are probably the first foreigners they've ever met. So we're really there. We're the frontliners for this program, because we are what they seen every week. They're just telling us about their problems, and then we talk about how to make things happen and support them all through the 12 weeks program. So yeah, that's pretty much the highlight of the program for me, is that we get to meet wonderful girls that get given a chance for this very prestigious program that otherwise they won't even know that it exists.
Thanks, Anggie. I think
Right.
so. You know, I think you have there are sort of two branches of your perspective here that I think would be really valuable to share. So, right, and this is why we talk about the program implementation. You're there through each step of the actual, what happens during the implementation of the program. So I'd love if you could focus on, if we think about the student perspective, right? So how are you and the facilitators aiding in student support? And then I also want to talk about, we talk a lot about the diversity of the students, but I think there's also something to be said about the training and the diversity and, frankly, the competence of the facilitators involved in the program, right? Especially if they are to then be responsible for supporting a really diverse group of students, and many of whom are coming from communities or backgrounds that they might not have any previous interaction with. So feel free to take those in either order, but would love to hear your thoughts on those.
Well, because of the uniqueness of this program, the participants of this program, we're pretty much feel that we're with them in their journey. The failure, the success, we want to celebrate them. And we talk a lot in our meetings with the facilitators. You have to be a very compassionate person to be on this program, because we are so used to train and facilitate privileged girls, of course. So the compassion that they they just want them to be successful is what's very important for us. When we think that that you have to be a from the privileged background to be in this kind of opportunity, then we were wrong, because given a chance, they're all striving. The support for them is, of course, very different. We're talking about girls that have no technology, no access to technology. We're talking about girls in war zones or in hiding place. For example, one of the girls in my cohort says that, Anggie, I don't even know what PowerPoint is. I don't even know what the other girl is talking about. In front of me is just markers and paper. I don't even know how to make capstone presentations with just this. So then us as facilitators have to be creative, because we want them to be successful. So that's another answer for a facilitator. Then we find a way to support them, not with technology, not with fancy apps or all the PowerPoints and Google Slides and all the software that privileged teenagers were familiar with. But then that makes us very creative in our own way. When we have limited resources, we become very creative. We learn a lot. The privilege is ours to be with these girls, actually. So when answering your second question, Sean, what does it take to be a facilitator for this kind of program? I think AFS did a very good job of choosing 11 and 12, including me, really good group and very strong women facilitators. They're no doubt have a good understanding of ICL, like intercultural learning, global competence, the STEM part of it, design thinking, and the social entrepreneurship. But also they are very compassionate women. They very much want people to feel included. And we come from different backgrounds. We come from different languages. Even that, just to let them know that none of us has English as our first language. Even saying that makes all these girls feel at home, so they don't have to speak perfect English to be in this program. And then we come from different cultures. We have come from different nationalities. So that sense, we are very strong, and we're all open-minded, of course, because we need that in this program. We just have to be open-minded and then really take the challenge as it is. And of course, the best thing is we communicate a lot. And for that, it takes certain level of maturity, of course, because at times this journey can be very emotional for us, because we know we're representing other women, and these young women look up to us a lot. So yeah.
Yeah,
hope that answers your question.
Definitely. I think that's really beautiful. You really touched on, it's not just a learning journey for the participants, it's also a learning opportunity for the facilitators of the program in many ways too, right? You are stretching your creativity, you're stretching your facilitation and communication styles. So I think you underlined the importance of really finding people who can adapt to and be flexible with situations involving diverse students.
Yeah, exactly.
That's great, Anggie. Thank you.
Thank you.
So kind of, if we think about now, right, so if we're supporting students throughout the implementation of the program, we know that facilitators are really key to delivering that support in the background. I would love if we could turn over now to Montana. So Montana, I'd love if you don't mind introducing yourself And then if I could also start you off with a question to lead into after you introduce yourself. So I think folks on the call probably want to know, why would a renowned Ivy League university be focused on supporting development of social impact skills, particularly in youth, right? Because this is a program for high school students. So if you could take it away.
Definitely. Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you, Sean. And thank you everyone for tuning in this morning or afternoon, evening, wherever we are. So yeah, as Sean mentioned, I'm a program manager at the Center for Social Impact Strategy, which is located in the School of Social Policy and Practice at the University of Pennsylvania. So I'm calling in today actually from campus in West Philadelphia. Although this is my first higher ed position, actually, I've only been here since the summer. Previously, I was in different youth advocacy roles in various capacities. I was a social worker in Baltimore and had a work experience in Quito, Ecuador. After that, I was able to do the Peace Corps as a youth development facilitator. I fell in love with facilitating and thought I would try my hand at teaching. I then taught in Camden, New Jersey for 5 years. And then a few years ago, I made a transition to the nonprofit world. And during a couple years into that, I started thinking I wanted more of an organizational budgeting understanding. So I ended up getting my master's in public administration at Penn and found the center through that experience. I just graduated with that master's in May, and I actually took an elective with the center. So just fell in love sort of with the work we were doing here. I did see when we did our sort of check-in in the beginning, I have a lot of higher ed peers here. So I think that's the perfect transition into the background of this partnership between the center and AFS. So the Center for Social Impact Strategy was founded by our current faculty director, Dr. Peter Frumpkin. And he has some really strong sort of principles around that the tools and resources of social impact should be accessible to anybody, anywhere, and that they should have, as Sean mentioned, immediate real world application, which lends itself to this accessibility and affordability. So initially, Dr. Frumpkin created multiple free online courses through platforms like Coursera and edX, which I'm sure many of you are familiar with, to create this sort of widespread accessibility that he envisioned. So those programs were super successful. They continue to be really successful, which allowed for the formation of the physical center at Penn. And then it led to the creation of these high quality executive programs that are affordable and able to work into people's professional lives. So that's really where the heart of the center's programming lies today, with these executive programs for working professionals. And then several years ago, a member of the AFS leadership team took one of our amazing executive programs, and that really allowed the center this opportunity to expand our programming and both increase its accessibility and allow us to think about accessibility differently. Because I think that we maybe had tunnel vision around something being accessible means it should cost less money, which isn't untrue, but we also realized that there was a huge population of youth that we weren't reaching. That is also part of what we talk about when we say something is accessible. And we know that with any change, sort of like the earlier we can start the process, the more effective or the greater the impact will be. So with AFS and this partnership, we were able to reach a youth population. They were sort of our gateway to find participants and handle the logistics that might be more difficult for a higher ed institute that's really doesn't have a lot of experience working with minors. And over the course of several years, we partnered with AFS to, you're gonna say something? Sorry.
No,
to deliver this
yeah, go ahead.
curriculum to high school students. And we started really with their mobile programs or their study abroad programs before we were able to, or AFS with their other partnerships as well, we were able to target a different, harder to reach population with the global STEM accelerators. So that's really the story of the center. And then I'm biased as a Penn grad, but I think it's fitting that that our center specifically really found its home at the University of Pennsylvania, which yes, is an Ivy League institution, but it was also founded by Ben Franklin, who in his day was probably the most well-known innovator in the world. And Penn really prides itself in carrying on this mission of his and creating this next generation of innovators. So I think that that has really allowed a liberal open mindset on the university's part when we talk about starting this social innovation process sooner with youth.
Thanks, Montana. That was a great tie-in. You touched on exactly what I was gonna ask you next. And I appreciate, I think you made a really nice tie over from what Anggie was talking about, which is, right, like money is important. Money is probably one of the biggest barriers. We know that to accessibility, but we also operate with a lot of assumptions, right? Like, do the students even have access to technology? How are they finding out about different programs? How are we reaching them? So I think you raised a good point. Like, we have to be on our toes, you know, on all different perspectives. And if we're looking specifically at assessment and impact, right? So AFS is partnering with this renowned Ivy League institution. There's a really awesome value add there for the students going through the program to have Penn on their certificate. So for our specific example, that's great. But I'm wondering if you can talk about maybe more broadly, and especially for folks on the call, like what, you know, how are we measuring assessment and impact, and what gets prioritized here?
Yeah, definitely. So even obviously before the partnership, the center had social impact curriculum. We've spent many years, many calls, reworking and co-developing this curriculum with AFS to make sure that it's going to be accessible for a younger population and for, at times, a more diverse population. So we've always prioritized, with the nature of AFS being a study abroad intercultural organization, and the idea of having aligned curriculum across many, many countries, partnering with a higher ed institution, we've always had a very virtual setup, which has been very advantageous for us as programming has changed, as the world has been hit with a global pandemic. We've had a really strong foundation because we've always relied on these remote virtual tools and platforms. So because we're co-developing the curriculum, AFS and Anggie's team and other people are facilitating it. And then after the students produce a capstone, it's coming back to Penn to be reviewed and validated. So to talk more about the validation process and sort of what are the components or observables of the validation, each participant is asked to submit a 3-minute recorded capstone presentation, which, as I mentioned, I'm in sort of like the most hands-off youth role I've ever been in. So this is really the highlight of my job. I love watching these videos. They're really, really impressive. And then, so we have, you know, of course, really important skills in being able to articulate your reasoning or whatever the heart of their presentation is, as well as just feeling comfortable doing more public speaking. And then within that, we of course have a rubric that we've worked on a lot that I think is sort of broad enough to be applicable across, you know, or transferable across many different groups, but also specific enough for them to demonstrate understanding of the material and for us to be able to sort of assess, did they truly understand what was happening? So the 4 main components that we look for in the recorded capstone presentation are the personal narrative, which is, we talk a lot about, we call it the story of us, the story of me, the story of you, the story of us, and sort of why they care about or are impacted by the issue they're identifying. So that's the first component. The second component is a problem statement. So sort of like a big, you know, maybe it's a statistic that really highlights why this is such a serious issue. And if you didn't know about it before, you should really care about it now. The third component, which is the most fun, is their prototype or how they're going to address this issue that they've identified. And then the final one is evidence that they've sought out feedback and are reworking or how they will, change this prototype, which I think that's also really, really important to the validation process, because while I'm going to talk about the certificate and sort of the meaning that has for students, the real goal for impact is the adoption of this mindset that failure is not only, shouldn't be the stopping point and is okay, but it's essential to an innovator's mindset, right? Like, we can only improve when something's gone wrong. So that's why the feedback part is a really important part of the process of their understanding, and also that we're addressing the process of getting feedback, not that, oh, you got negative feedback, because that's normal. So then after that validation, after we go through and we look, students need 3 of those 4 components. Yeah, they, either myself or somebody else on the CSIS team will provide really targeted, really direct feedback on their specific presentation and prototype. And we try to be really intentional about giving a next step, right? Because nothing's final in the social impact world, that in tandem with this certificate that we hope they see as a reward for their hard effort, and also, maybe, I don't want to say dangling fruit, but like a motivator to keep working and to adopt this entrepreneurial spirit in both personal and professional issues. With that feedback, we hope we're really sort of guiding them towards a path to use these tools of design thinking and stuff in all aspects of their lives.
That's great, Montana. Thanks for sort of walking us through the front to end of that process. And I'm wondering, and this is something I've heard from other folks in the field too, as they're grappling with their own sort of, how do we implement programs on our campus, whether they're travel-based or in this hybrid space or totally virtual. I'm wondering if you have any insights on, do you notice differences between capstones that you see from students who are physically traveling versus students who are in a program like the one that we've been talking about today, which is totally online? And if there are any insights you want to address there.
Right. Definitely. So as I mentioned, I don't have a really sort of long-term institutional memory, but I have done probably like 5 to 6 different groups of these. And very quickly into the group of STEM accelerators, I reached out to Saskia and other people on the team, because I'd sort of been forewarned about maybe some of the technological issues, that just the quality of literally like audio, they weren't sure how it was going to come through. And sure, there were some videos with maybe a lot of background noise or things like that, but the actual sort of depth of the project, I was about to quit my job and come work for AFS, because I was like, these kids are so amazing. All of them are amazing and come up with really creative projects and are putting themselves out there. And so I'm not discrediting any of the validations, but I don't know if it was, that it was completely virtual, or more that this particular population were identifying issues in their home communities or communities where they'd been living for a longer period of time than maybe the study abroad ones, that the depth and specificity of the problems they were identifying, or, how they talked about the personal narrative and how they were affected by it, it immediately came off in just a very compelling way. You could tell that this was not sort of, okay, I have to meet these requirements on a rubric, and I'm working backwards, that this was something that they really understood and were affected by.
That's great. And I think, I'm wondering too, so you've been very nice and positioned the partnership in a really great light. So thank you for that. But I'm wondering if you can just briefly touch on, what we went through this partnership in a pandemic. A lot has changed about the way that we work together. And a lot has changed, frankly, about how the program works. The way we piloted, fortunately, went really well, but I'm wondering if you could just maybe briefly talk about some pivots in our, in the working relationship, and thinking about specifically the end goal of the program. What were some big takeaways for you?
Yeah, honestly, I mean, I've talked before that I haven't been here the longest of everybody in the center. I think something that for me has made things really easy is open communication, whether it is with you. I think I email Saskia almost daily, or other people on the AFS team, and getting really prompt responses. And while it's never been stated explicitly, I think that there is a shared understanding that the participants are the priority, and whatever challenges, because I'm sure that AFS or the facilitating team had a lot of those issues, maybe like reaching participants, particularly in the STEM Accelerator group or things like that. They never got to me. And I think that also comes in the foundation of our partnership, where we divide sort of the responsibilities, and that management of those challenges was really more part of the AFS partnership. But it also allowed me to view the validations and endorse the validations without any of sort of that stress or things that could be affecting my opinion on it. And I just see the presentations and I see this like beautiful end project. So I also think the separation of responsibilities allows for a more, I don't know if authentic is the best word, but for a better validation process for the participants. So it naturally prioritizes the youth.
Great. Thank you so much, Montana. I appreciate your tips and guidance. And it really is a wonderful partnership. And I think that, folks on the call coming from your own higher ed institutions, I would urge you to consider about what kinds of partnerships might you be involved with on your own campuses, because again, this is not like some magical formula that should only exist with us. I think it is, this sort of partnership approach it could be much more beneficial to other players involved. So great, we are going to turn over to the Q&A portion now. And so if you want to enter some questions in the Q&A function on your Zoom panel, and then I would ask, if there's a question that comes up for one of our panelists, I would love if you want to just step in to answer those. And we have time for probably 2 or 3 questions, and then we'll move into some closing up housekeeping before we close out this call. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen for the moment. Okay, so one of the first questions I'm seeing is, what supports are you offering female students who wish to pursue these skills but living in communities with limited resources, human rights issues against them, such as not having a right to education, and mental health? Can you provide real examples? I don't necessarily want to put you on the spot, but Anggie, I think that you might have some real examples you could share briefly here, if you're comfortable doing so.
Yeah, sure. As facilitators, of course, we would like to do more than virtual programs. We would like to take those girls out of their dangerous place or wherever they are. So what we've done in the past as facilitator is to let them know that we are here. If they need like reference letter, we can of course share our LinkedIn profile. So a few of them already, well, quite a lot of them already come to us facilitators like, I have been accepted in this university for next year, but I need a proof rather than the certificate for me to be accepted. Do you mind to be our referral? So stuff like that, we commonly get it. Some of them, after they graduated from the programs, reach out to us, and we sometimes have good relationships there. So we give them a lot of like scholarship or internship opportunities for them. So as we're not policymakers that can make sure they're safe, but as facilitators, we definitely open all opportunities for them. And when we know scholarship info that can make them go to the next level, we're always there to support them, even years after program.
Thank you, Anggie. Dina, I think you might also be able to address, I'm thinking particularly about, working in communities with human rights issues or abuses. I know your work also touches on that a lot, if you don't mind sharing some insight.
Sure. I actually wanted also to add on what Anggie said regarding women and female. For example, in all our programs, actually 50 to 60% is the target of the females that has to be benefited from our programs and services. And we actually, as I told you, we're focusing on people from vulnerable areas in each country, and that is need. To be honest, we faced so many difficulties sometimes to convince also the, let's say, around environment communities that they are working on. But at the same time, Sparks also provides some resources for people. So if, for example, this woman cannot actually move from her area to the where we have, for example, trainings, etc. We actually also provide them with, for example, any tech device that can make them continue their engagements, and they're working, they're studying through these, for example, iPad, laptops, etc. It's very challenging, but we actually succeeded to work with many female from vulnerable areas that have some, human rights issues, abuse, etc.
That's great. Thank you, Dina. So I see, I'm going to just address a question I saw in the chat. Is there a report about the experience that could be shared? So we're actually compiling feedback and assessment data from the pilot of this program to provide a more detailed end of year report. So I would encourage you to stay tuned for that. And this ties into the next question that came in through the Q&A box, which is how do students find the Accelerators program? So Saskia, if I could call on you to pop into the chat for everyone the link to the Accelerators website, because that's at least our primary gateway into the program. We house the application link there once it's open for recruitment. And that's also where you can find more information about the program. And once we have more details about it, we'll post an annual report there. I wish we could stay on. I mean, we could keep talking about this. It's a really, again, a topic we're all passionate about. But that being said, you all do have lives and other things to do outside of this call. So just some quick sort of housekeeping to end with. One second here. So I just wanted to make a quick plug. The AFS Youth Assembly is now open and accepting applications. So totally different program than what we've just been talking about. But it is an opportunity for young leaders, social entrepreneurs, and activists to gather in New York City. It will happen next year, August 11th through 13th. And if you want to learn more about what the Youth Assembly is, the website for that program is there. alumni who go through the global STEM accelerators, when they become young adults, they are ultimately invited to apply for scholarships. So just another great way to sort of keep paying back to that community. And then just really quickly, if you wouldn't mind giving us feedback on the session, or if you have any comments or questions, you can either scan that QR code, or Saskia, I'll ask again if you don't mind putting the closing Menti in the chat for everyone, or the type form rather. That's it for now. Really, really big thank you again to Dina, Anggie, Montana. Thank you to Saskia for supporting us in the background. And thanks everyone for joining us. Like I mentioned, we have one more session coming up tomorrow, but I hope that you've enjoyed this session. And if you have any other questions or comments that have come up, feel free to email us at globalstem@afs.org. Really appreciate you being here. And thanks again to everyone. All right, take care all.
Thank you, Sean.